What we're talking about here is mastery. What is mastery? Very simply, it's getting better at something that matters. What's important to you? You're going to keep doing it. You're going to get involved with it. You're going to learn how to do it better. You're going to practice, practice, practice. The way you get to Carnegie Hall, that's the way you get into long-term recovery. Practice, practice, practice. And as such, mastery starts out as a mindset. That begins with motivation. Motivation has all kinds of levels on it. I'm not going to get into the discussion about that. Motivation has internal and external. And there's also a level of motivation that's just good in and of itself. I stay sober because if I don't, my wife's going to leave me. I'm going to lose my job. Back when Vernon Johnson was setting up intervention ideas, the most successful interventions occurred when the boss said, you're going to lose your job if you don't go into treatment, but you'll have it if you come back. Most successful interventions at that point. Wife, leaving, family, those were very strong external motivators. The internal motivation was, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. That's when you begin to develop the understanding that something has to be different. So this is the mindset. In long-term recovery, what you discover is recovery itself is good, just as it is. It's not about that other stuff anymore. It's about being in recovery. Now, there's two ways of looking at mindset. Sometimes you can have a fixed mindset that says, this is the way things are, can't do anything about it. Or you can take a growth mindset that says, maybe I can do something about it. Again, with the both and that I'm talking about here, I can believe it's possible, even if it's fixed. I have a disease called a substance use disorder. It's there, whether, as in a book written many years ago in AA says, it's a disease or not, but I know I got it. But I can learn to cope, and I can learn to be different. I can change. Mastery is a pain in a lot of places. I don't know of anybody, myself included, who if they were said, you want to spend the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years working on your character defects and shortcomings, I'll take a pass on that one. It's mentally exhausting. The mental work is hard. We all know that. People in treatment who sit and work on themselves all day, working on this mentally, are exhausted at night. Maybe sometimes even more so than physically exhausted. The brain uses a lot of energy. It takes perseverance and passion to reach long-term goals and long-term recovery. Perseverance, keep on going. Passion, it's worth it. I want this. I like this. I like what's happening. This is in long-term recovery. After you get through the first few years, this long-term recovery is where you'll go. There will be times of giving up. There will be obstacles, but they will not be blockades. Mastery is also a path, not a destination. Often when people feel better, they quit. I had a friend years ago whose mother was what we now call bipolar. Once she got on her meds, she was feeling great. She stopped taking her meds. She was back where she was. You feel better. I've arrived is not an option with a disease like this. One of the things about mastery is you never get to it. You get closer to perfect mastery. That's what this graph shows here. It shows a particular equation that keeps getting closer and closer to that line, but it never gets there. That's why the mindset is important. We got progress, not perfection. So I think there are 5 steps that get us closer to mastery. And this comes from a number of books. And I have bibliography at the end of this, which will help you find them. The first of these is deliberate practice. Practice like this is designed to increase performance and move out of your comfort zone. I'm a trumpet player, and about 7 years ago, I got involved with a group at a trumpet workshop who taught me a whole new way after almost 50 years of playing trumpet. They taught me a whole new way of looking at my trumpet playing and working on it. What that is, I'll get back to in a minute. I had to move out of my comfort zone, and I had to practice deliberately, intentionally. I had to have new goals, reach higher, not just practice what I already knew. If I kept practicing what I already knew in the way I did it, I'd probably be practicing the same mistakes. There are ways of getting around that. So you go to repeat first. You keep doing it. The best free throw shooters in the basketball game don't just show up and shoot 10 free throws and go on and dribble around the court. They shoot 300, 500, thousands of times. They keep shooting free throws. You build on the basics and you use them to grow. A few years ago, I had an opportunity to be around one of my trumpet heroes, Doc Severinsen, formerly of The Tonight Show. And every day he practices about 3 hours. He warms up for about 3 hours. And he starts the same way he has for decades. He plays long tones and scales. The same scales and the same long tones I play. Why? Because he has to listen. He has to be deliberate. He's building on the basics. And even somebody like Doc, but all of us in recovery and mastery, need also to seek constant critical feedback. This is one of the difficulties with always saying, hey, you're great. You don't need to do anything different. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. If you don't know how you're doing, you're not going to know what to improve. And the best advice comes from someone, from an expert, or from someone who's already done it. Think sponsor. Think people around the tables. Think people who are also going through what you've gone through and may have found a way to get through it in a new way that you haven't discovered yet. That's that constant critical feedback. It goes on forever. On and on. And once you get that feedback, you focus ruthlessly on where you need help. Take the advice and work with it. Last year, I met with my mentor or teacher over in Wisconsin. And he said, as we're ready to leave, he says, okay, here's what I want you to work on. And it seemed, what? I don't do that. He says, yeah, you do. You're not listening. And I wasn't. I thought I was doing well in that area. I needed improvement. He said, now you're moving beyond the basics of trumpet playing. Those who get better at what they do focus on their weaknesses. What is it about my program today, 32 years later, that needs strengthening? Where is it weak? What do I need to do? What about me? Where are my blind spots? What am I not seeing? Hopefully, by the time you get to 10 years, my friend's magic 10 years, you've learned how to do some of that. You've learned how to be more self-involved, learning to take the criticisms and to hear the ideas and apply them to yourself. You have them, I have them, we all have the blind spots. How do we work with them and improve them? Perhaps the most important one, especially after you get into that maintenance stage of long-term recovery, be prepared throughout this whole process that it's going to be mentally and physically exhausting. I think that's why people step away from it. I think that's why people stop. It's too tight. Not again. Or it may be something else, which we'll get to in a minute. You got to keep going, because when you're retraining the brain and rebalancing the chemistry, it's going to use energy, mental energy. And it's not just going through the motions. I don't just pick up my trumpet and play the scales because I'm supposed to play the scales. I have to play, and you have to play. You have to do what you do. If you're going to be a good counselor, you're going to have to go through this. That's why we have supervision. That's why we have all those wonderful things we do to be trained, but we have to continue doing them if you're going to continue to grow as a counselor. Same is true in recovery. So what are some of the signs and symptoms of mastery? I like to start with this one. It comes straight out of the big book. When you're into the mastery level, There's a happiness, a joy, and a freedom. You no longer feel the same kind of weight on your shoulders. You're no longer feeling down and out of sorts all the time. There's a joy. It's also called serenity. It's not that joy that we looked for in our early days, or even when we were trying to get happy, joyous, and free with the use of chemicals. It's not a, wow, look at that, I'm jumping all around. It's a serenity. It's a peace. And that brings us a freedom to live. Another sign of mastery is you continue to do it even when it isn't fun anymore. Because I think somewhere we begin to believe and begin to know that it is going to be fun. It is going to be enjoyable. And it's not the actions, it's the result of the actions. It's the consequences. Big book, Acceptance is the answer to all my problems. Acceptance is one of those signs and symptoms, as well as having a sense of purpose, who you are, what you're going to do, what's life like. You may not have to figure out where you're going to be in 10 years. A year ago, none of us, as has been said, would have thought where we are today as a result of COVID. But that's because we're living in today, planning for tomorrow, and getting ready for whatever comes. And that sense of purpose. I was at a workshop last week that was completely different. Nobody had done one like that I know of, or many people. The leader said it didn't change because of COVID. It's not better because of COVID. It is better because of COVID. Thank you for forcing us to think differently. That's accepting what is and moving on, avoiding resentments and self-pity, rejecting fantasizing, accepting reality, and turning to the promises. If we are painstaking, there's that word pain. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we're halfway through.